I was merging onto I-65 South when my phone buzzed with the emergency alert I had assigned to one contact and one contact only. My neighbor, Harriet. She was 71 years old, a retired schoolteacher, who had lived in the house to my left for 22 years. She had watered my plants during every conference trip I ever took. She had sat with me at the kitchen table the night my wife Naomi passed. She had waved from her porch that morning when I backed out of the driveway. Harriet did not use her phone for emergencies unless something was actually an emergency. I read the message at the next red light. Marvin, stop the car, don't go home, check your study camera, right now. 3 sentences, no punctuation on the last one, which meant she had typed it fast, which meant she was scared. My name is Marvin Cross. I am 67 years old. For 34 years, I was a cardiac surgeon at Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville, Tennessee. I have stood at an operating table while a man's heart stopped beating and started again under my hands. I know what fear smells like in a room, and I know the difference between someone being dramatic and someone telling the truth. I pulled into the parking lot of a tire shop on Murfreesboro Pike and put the car in park. My daughter and her husband were supposed to be on a plane. Their anniversary trip, a long weekend in Charleston, South Carolina, something my daughter had been talking about since January. I had driven them to B&A myself that morning, carried her carry-on to the curb, hugged them both, and watched them disappear through the sliding glass doors. That was 3 hours ago. I opened the security camera app on my phone. My hands were steady. Surgeons train for years to keep their hands steady. The study feed loaded. I saw my son-in-law standing at my oak desk with both hands inside the bottom drawer, pulling papers out and stacking them on the floor. He was not wearing the blazer he had on at the airport. He had changed into a plain t-shirt. He had packed the t-shirt. He had planned this before he ever stepped into my car that morning. My daughter was standing by the window. Her back was mostly to the camera. She was not helping him search, but she was not stopping him either. She was holding her phone to her ear, speaking quietly to someone I could not hear. I switched to the front door camera. A dark blue Jeep Cherokee was parked at the curb that I did not recognize. I sat in that parking lot for 4 full minutes without moving. A man in overalls knocked on my passenger window to ask if I needed help with my tires. I shook my head and he moved on. Let me explain something about how a cardiac surgeon is trained to respond to a crisis. You do not react, you assess. You do not let adrenaline make your decisions. Adrenaline is fuel, but it needs a controlled burn. The moment you let panic drive the scalpel, somebody dies on your table. I watched the camera feed for another 60 seconds. My son-in-law had moved to the filing cabinet beside the bookshelf. He was going through the drawers with the practiced efficiency of a man who knew exactly what he was looking for, which meant someone had described this room to him in detail before today. Then he moved to the corner where Naomi's cedar chest sat. That chest was the one piece of furniture I had refused to move after Naomi passed 4 years ago from ovarian cancer. It had belonged to her grandmother. It was hand-carved, 60 years old, and inside it she had kept her journals, the letters I wrote her during my residency, and a small wooden box containing her mother's cameo brooch. I had not opened it since the morning after her funeral, when I sat on the floor beside it for 2 hours and couldn't bring myself to lift the lid. My son-in-law lifted the lid. He started pulling things out, the journals, the bundled letters. He was setting them on the floor and feeling along the interior walls, probing the bottom like a man searching for a false compartment, looking for cash, looking for anything with a dollar sign on it. I felt a cold, clean anger settle into my chest, not hot, not shaking. Cold, the kind of cold that precedes a very precise cut. I put the car in drive. I did not drive toward home. I drove to the Marriott Courtyard on McGavick Pike, 2 miles from the airport. I checked in at the front desk, paid cash, carried my laptop bag up to room 214, and sat on the edge of the bed. Here is what I had not told my daughter or my son-in-law. When the neighborhood had a string of break-ins 18 months ago, I did not just install a doorbell camera. I installed 8 cameras total, including 2 interior units in the study and the living room, all feeding to an encrypted cloud server that a former Vanderbilt IT security specialist had built for me. Nothing in that house moved without those cameras seeing it. I opened the laptop and pulled up the full system. The man from the blue Jeep walked inside 20 minutes later. He was younger than my son-in-law, maybe mid-40s, and he moved through the front door the way men move through rooms they have already decided belong to them. He went straight to the study without looking around. I turned up the audio gain on the microphone embedded in the smoke detector. "So where does he keep the liquid account information?" the Jeep man was saying. "She doesn't know about the details," my son-in-law said. "She thinks it's just a standard brokerage." The Jeep man, I would later learn his name was Kent, a disbarred real estate attorney who now operated what he called a private asset recovery consultancy, picked up one of Naomi's journals off the floor and fanned the pages. He dropped it without reading a word of it. "You said he has over $1 million in municipal bonds," Kent said. "Where would the bond certificates be?" "With his estate attorney. We can't access those directly. But the lake house, he keeps the deed in this desk. We get the deed and a power of attorney. We can have it listed before he even makes it home from the airport." My daughter spoke for the first time. She was standing in the doorway. Her voice was quieter than his. Her voice had always been quieter than his. "He'll know," she said. He's not slow, Todd. He doesn't have to know immediately. He just has to be slow enough that by the time he catches up, the transaction is already recorded." My daughter was quiet. "This clears the loan, right?" she said. "After this, it's done. You said this would be the end of it." "Absolutely," my son-in-law said. He did not look at her when he said it. I leaned back against the headboard in room 214. A cardiac surgeon develops a skill over 34 years of practice that never appears in any textbook. You learn to read what is not being said, the pauses, the avoidance of eye contact, the answers that are technically accurate but structurally false. My son-in-law had just handed my daughter a lie wearing the clothes of a promise. I had seen that particular garment before, in the faces of families in waiting rooms who were not yet ready to hear what I had to tell them. What I would learn over the next 48 hours. My son-in-law owed $380,000 to a private hard money lender who had financed a failed mixed-use development project in Gallatin, about 30 miles northeast of Nashville. The project had been underwater for 2 years. The lender had called the note. The deadline was 72 hours from that afternoon. My son-in-law did not need the lake house to cover a debt. He needed it to buy himself enough time to disappear. My daughter did not know that. My daughter had spent 5 years being slowly turned away from the truth, the way water gets redirected around a rock in a stream. A little pressure here, a slight current there, until you no longer remember which direction you were originally going. She had told me in January that his business was having a rough patch. She had told me in March they were looking at options. She had never once spoken the number to me. $380,000. That number had been kept from her too, in its full form. I thought about calling her. I sat with that thought for a long moment, watching the camera feed on the laptop, my daughter standing still in the doorway of my study, while her husband dismantled my filing system. I did not call her, not yet. I called Sid Moreau. Sid had been 2 years ahead of me at Vanderbilt Medical School and had made the pivot to law in his late 30s when a nerve injury ended his surgical career. He was now, at 70, the most methodical trust and estate attorney in the state of Tennessee. He had drafted Naomi's trust documents. He knew every clause of it by memory. He picked up on the second ring. "Marvin, I had a feeling I'd be hearing from you one of these days." "Sid," I said, "I need you to walk me through what happens if someone attempts to convey property held in the Naomi Trust without authorization." He was quiet for 2 seconds. "Tell me what you're looking at," he said. I told him, slowly, the way I speak in an operating room, no wasted words, just findings in sequence. When I finished, Sid said, "They can't touch it, Marvin. Not one line item. The lake house transferred into the trust 3 years ago with clean title. The municipal portfolio is trust property. Your brokerage accounts are trust property. You hold a life estate interest. You live there and manage it, full stop. If your son-in-law finds the deed, what he will find is the Naomi Cross Medical Education Trust, listed as the named owner, with a federal tax identification number for a nonprofit charitable organization. He could forge your name on every document in that study, and it would convey nothing, because the underlying assets are not yours to transfer." "I want this documented," I said, "all of it." Already thinking about who to call, Sid said. He had a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Field Office in Nashville. He had worked with them on estate fraud recovery cases for years. He made the call while I was still on with him. Then at 7:15 in the evening my phone rang from my daughter's number. I answered. I let a small silence breathe before I spoke, the way a man does when the phone has pulled him up from the edge of sleep. Hey, sweetheart, everything okay? Oh, yeah, hi, Dad, sorry to call. She sounded wound tight. I just wanted to check in. I'm fine, I said. Little tired. Quiet house. You all get there all right? Yes, we landed fine. We're actually still at the gate, weather delay, but we're fine. Oh, that's a shame. You get a good seat on the plane? Mm-hmm. She paused. Dad, I had a question. About some paperwork. Did you happen to leave anything out on the desk in the study? Anything related to the lake house property? What kind of paperwork, honey? She hesitated 2 beats too long. Just general. We were thinking about a document Todd needs for his truck's insurance rider, and I thought maybe you had a copy of something there. I let out the slow, distracted exhale of a man thinking about nothing much. I keep that desk locked, I said. I think everything's in order in there. Right, of course. She paused again. Okay. You're eating? You're taking your blood pressure medication? I am doing both of those things, I said. Good. Okay. I love you, Dad. I love you too. I set the phone on the bed and watched the camera. My daughter walked back into the study. She said something quiet to my son-in-law. He closed his eyes briefly. Then he looked at Kent and nodded once. Kent pulled a slim leather case from his jacket and unzipped it, a lockpick set. He crossed to the desk. I called Sid. It's time, I said. Already made the call, Sid said. Give them 25 minutes. Stay where you are. I watched the feed. It took Kent 6 minutes to work the desk lock. My son-in-law reached inside and removed the accordion file where I kept property records. He opened it on the desk surface. He found the lake house deed immediately. It was tabbed. I watched his face as he read the first line of the document. The trust name was printed there in plain 10-point font, Naomi Cross Medical Education Trust. Below it, the federal EIN of a registered 501(c)(3) charitable organization. His expression moved through several distinct phases in about 4 seconds. Confusion, recalculation, then something I recognized from 34 years of delivering news that patients were not prepared for. The understanding that the situation is not what you believed it to be. This isn't right, he said. He set the deed down. This property belongs to a trust, a charity. Kent took the document and read it. He placed it back on the desk without comment. Who is Naomi Cross? He asked. My daughter answered from the doorway. Her voice was entirely different now, flat, like something underneath it had been removed. That's his wife, she said, my mother. He set up a trust in her name after she died. She looked at the deed on the desk for a long moment. Then she said, What are we looking for in here, Todd? What are we actually looking for? He started to form an answer. She said, Don't. One word, the firmest I had ever heard from her in 32 years. You told me this was about a short-term bridge. You said he had personal accounts we could borrow against temporarily. You used that word, borrow. I need you to explain to me right now what the actual number is. The real number. He did not answer. The blue and red light came through the study window then, the slow, rotating pulse of 2 federal vehicles pulling to the curb. Harriet had given them the spare key before they arrived. The front door opened without a knock. My daughter did not run. She did not raise her voice. She walked to the living room couch and sat down and placed both hands flat on her knees. My son-in-law stood in the center of the room. Kent moved toward the back of the house and was met in the hallway by an agent who had been positioned in the yard for the past 20 minutes. I watched it all from room 214. I watched until Sid's message came through. Done. Come home when you're ready. I sat on the edge of the bed for a while. A surgeon accumulates something over the decades that is not listed in any residency curriculum. You come to understand that the body keeps its own record of every stress it has endured. You can see it in the tissue, the places that healed thicker, the faint traces of old repairs. The body does not forget what it has been through. It just keeps working. I thought about my daughter standing in that doorway, asking the right question too late. That is not weakness. That is what happens to a person who has been fed a careful, sustained story for long enough that the story starts to feel like the ground they are standing on. I had delivered enough hard diagnoses in my career to know that the patient is rarely the one who failed. The full shape of it came out over the following 2 days. My son-in-law had described symptoms of cognitive decline to my daughter for 8 months, fabricated incidents, times I had supposedly forgotten where I had parked, moments of confusion he had invented and delivered to her, with enough specific detail that she had begun to watch me differently. He had told her, carefully and incrementally, that I would need managed care within a year or two, and that the responsible thing, the loving thing, was to begin transitioning assets before I lost the capacity to participate in those decisions myself. He had called it protecting the family. My daughter had believed him, not because she was careless, because she loved me and was afraid of what aging looked like up close, and that fear had made his voice sound like the voice of reason. She had not known about Kent. She had not known the real number on the debt. She had not known he intended to be across a state line before I realized the lake house was on the market. She cooperated with investigators from the first conversation. My son-in-law was charged with wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of an elderly adult under Tennessee Code 716120. Kent faced a separate charge matrix. The private lender who had issued the balloon note was under parallel investigation within the week, which did not surprise me. Men who operate that way rarely keep clean books anywhere. I did not file charges against my daughter. I went home the morning after. Harriet was on her front porch when I turned into the driveway. She came across the yard and hugged me without preamble, the way old friends do, and I let her. After a moment, she stepped back and looked at me with the direct, measured honesty of a woman who has lived next door to someone long enough to know them. "You going to be all right?" she said. I thought about that, honestly. "I'm going to be standing," I said. "That's enough for right now." She nodded. She went back inside. I went into the study. Someone, an agent I believed, had stacked Naomi's journals carefully back inside the cedar chest and left the lid open. They were not in their original order, but they had been handled with care. I folded each one back into place the way I had last arranged them. Her high school diary on top, then the spiral notebook from the year we met, then the letters bundled with a green rubber band, and finally the small wooden box with her mother's brooch sitting inside it. I closed the lid. I sat down at the desk. The drawer was still hanging open where Kent had picked the lock. The accordion file was on the surface. I started to file it back, and that was when I saw it on the floor beside the desk leg, knocked off the corner of the surface in all the searching. A birthday card. The envelope was in my daughter's 8-year-old handwriting, my name in purple crayon, letters slightly uneven, the M wider than the rest. The tape on the back had gone brittle years ago, and the card had fallen open on the hardwood. "Happy birthday, Daddy. You are the most important person in the whole world. I want to be just like you when I grow up. I love you times a million." At the bottom she had drawn a stethoscope, lopsided. The kind of drawing where you can tell the child pressed very hard with the crayon, determined to get it right. I held it for a long time. My daughter was 32 years old. She had made choices that could not be walked back. She had looked away from things she should have faced directly. Those were facts. A surgeon operates on facts. But the body keeps its own record. I set the card on the corner of the desk, propped against the pen holder where it could stand upright. Everything else, the legal proceedings, the hard conversations ahead, the long and uncertain work of rebuilding what we had broken between us, none of it was going to happen quickly. None of it was supposed to. Healing that is rushed is healing that fails. I filed the accordion folder back into the drawer and locked it. I went to the kitchen and put on a pot of coffee. Outside the back window, Old Hickory Lake would be silver and still in the late afternoon light, 45 minutes up the road in Hendersonville. Naomi's trust was intact. The scholarship endowment was intact. Everything she had spent her last clear months building to outlast both of us was exactly where she had placed it. She had understood something that I, the surgeon, the man who spent his career repairing damage after the fact, had taken longer to learn. You do not protect the people you love by keeping them from consequences. You protect them by building something that holds, even when they aren't looking, even when you aren't there, even when someone who means them harm is standing in the room, explaining why the walls should come down. The coffee finished brewing. I poured a cup and stood at the counter and watched the light change across the backyard. Naomi used to say the heart doesn't break clean. It gets remodeled, thicker in some places, a little scarred, but still moving blood. That is what the body does after surgery, and that is what a person does after the kind of week I had just lived through. You don't come out the other side the same. You come out with scar tissue where something soft used to be, and you learn to trust the scar. I took my coffee to the chair by the window. Outside, the evening was coming in slow and quiet the way evenings do in Nashville in the fall, the light going amber across the grass, the street going still. I sat there until the room got dark. Some losses teach you exactly what you are made of. I had believed, after 34 years of surgery and a lifetime of building something worth inheriting, that I already knew. But there is a difference between holding another man's heart in your hands and understanding what holds yours together when the people closest to you decide to test it. I know the difference now. The foundation held. The things worth keeping are still here. That is enough to build from.